is Sam Roberts, host of the Bounce Off podcast, the #1 SlamBall podcast worldwide. The interview you're about to listen to is with head coach Brendan Kirsch of the Mob, recorded yesterday on Monday, the 24th of July, right after his team had just gone 4-0 in the opening weekend of SlamBall. It's a really good conversation. Make sure you check out the whole thing. If you're looking for somewhere to talk about SlamBall with your friends, you can hop on Twitter and talk to me at Quantum Roberts. That's QUANTUM Roberts. Or you can go to the link in my description where our good friend Lone Ranger has a Discord that is all about things like Big 3 basketball, but there's also a bunch of people there who are talking SlamBall right now. And if you want to stay up to date on all the statistical data in SlamBall, there's a link to that in the comment in the description as well. You know, the description is where things are described. The comments are where you leave comments for me. Most importantly with that, this Thursday, as we run up to the second weekend of SlamBall action, there will be a Q&A podcast here on the Bounce Off channel. If you have questions about how this season has gone so far, whether that be on the court, with coaching, behind the scenes, or just how the league is structured, make sure you leave a comment down in the comment section, and we will address those on Thursday with myself and maybe some special guests. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Make sure you enjoy this interview with Coach Brendan Kirsch. Welcome everyone to Bounce Off Podcast. I am Sam Roberts. I am joined by Coach Brendan Kirsch, Kirsch. I got that wrong on the start. That's great. Head coach of the Mob since 2002, most championships in SlamBall history. Currently the winningest coach in modern SlamBall with 4 straight wins, and now my competition as host of SlamBall Nation, an upcoming SlamBall podcast. So I thought I'd get that in there as well.
I appreciate it, Sam. I appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure to be able to sit here and talk to you today.
How are you doing on this Monday morning? I just mentioned you've got 4 straight wins in the league. You're the only undefeated team in modern SlamBall. How does it feel?
It feels good. I'm tired. I'm on my second coffee of the day. It's, it takes a lot of energy out of you. I can only imagine like how the players are feeling after having to play 4 games in the last, couple days. But I woke up and I was definitely tired today.
Do you have much time off, or was there training today, or is it today's the day off and then we're back at it tomorrow?
The schedule is kind of tiered for all the teams depending on where they play. So a couple of teams are off today. A couple of teams will practice. We're off. Today is like our only off day of the week. So the players are taking care of their mind, bodies, and spirits today.
Do you guys have a complete schedule for the season? Because I know from our perspective, the SlamBall site only had this weekend's matchup set, and it's still not got the exact matchups for the coming weeks. Do you guys know what you've got planned for this week, or is the league still to give you that information?
Nope, we don't have it. So they issue the schedule. They'll issue the schedule for this upcoming weekend at some point today, and we'll see what that looks like. We have our practice schedules and everything set for tomorrow and Wednesday, but we don't know who we play or when starting on Thursday. I mean, I check my phone like every few minutes to see if it comes through, but we don't have it yet.
Does that scheduling, is that something, do you happen to know if that's based on how the previous weekend has gone, they'll then decide who's playing who, or is it just that they're trying to randomize it as much as possible for you guys?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head the first thing. I think it's they're looking at who played well and who didn't in the first weekend, and they're trying to make entertaining matchups for the following weekend. I think that's what they're doing.
When you receive your upcoming schedule for the week, are you game planning specifically for who you're coming up against, or are you sort of like, no, we've got our game, we focus on our game, and we'll play through our game?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, we have kind of a running scouting report on all the teams. We watch all the games, obviously, and then we can break them down. I mean, we have a really cool app that's like a database of all the games where we can access that and do some scouting. It's instant. It has instant stats and everything else. So we'll use that. But for the most part, like for us at least, we're just worried about us, right? Like we want to be prepared as coaches to be able to share the information we need to with the players, unlike the other teams. But they're worried about them because we're big believers that, we've seen all the teams play, and I just don't think any team is capable of beating us. I just think we're capable of beating ourselves, and that's what we're most worried about.
Right. So your general attitude is that the Mob are going to go undefeated this year. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not my general attitude, because I've seen the guys and we have breakdowns in communication. We have breakdowns in execution. So like, as well as we've played, we haven't played to the best of our ability yet. So I think the sky is still the limit there, but we'll see how it goes. It's a long season. And what I can tell you is like, we came out of the gates hot and we came out of the gates strong, but all these teams are going to get better and better throughout the course of the season. So I think it's going to be a lot more competitive. We were watching as a team film from season 2, and it was like the second game that Noah Ballou, Trevor Anderson, and Kevin Cassidy ever played. And it was like Kevin Cassidy was totally off balance in the stopper bed. Trevor Anderson was scared of the tramps, and Noah Ballou could barely get to the rim. And so you fast forward like 7 games, and all of a sudden, they're dominant. So players and teams will get better as the season goes on.
And you're talking about that from the perspective of your opposition rather than your own team, because I think it would be crazy for you to sit here and tell me that your team is struggling to get into the tramps or get to the rim. But I can understand what you're saying from maybe your competition is taking a little while to get comfortable in a competitive environment.
I think so. I think that's what we ran into, especially on opening night. Like, not to put any business out there, but like I looked at our guys' eyes and we faced off against the Rumble in the opening game. And I looked into the Rumble's eyes too. And everybody's eyes were the size of planets. It was a new experience for everybody to go from scrimmages in a warehouse to real slam ball on TV with a national audience on ESPN in an arena like Cox Pavilion. So I think there was some nerves and some jitters and all those types of things.
Is your team, so I would much rather talk about this later and talk about your history first, but we're into it already. Is your team, is that a coached thing? Were they coached to feel a little bit more comfortable, or do you think just they know what they're doing and they know they've got to go and execute, or they're ready for this opportunity?
No, I mean, I think we try as coaches, Coach Ballou and I, we try to make them comfortable in every game environment. And sometimes that's us kind of holding back our emotions and being cool, calm, and collected. And sometimes they need those emotions to help them get going. So it's kind of a delicate balance here and there, but we tried the very best we could to make sure they were ready to play. And, we told them before the game on opening night, like first quarter is going to be first quarter jitters. You guys lay a couple hits, take a couple hits. Those will probably go away. And then we're going to really coach you up and hold you to our standard quarters 3 through 4. And that's what we did.
And was that just for game 1, or are you talking about that for every game you have, that you're expecting jitters, or?
No, that was just game 1. I think coming out game 2, they were a lot more comfortable. And then certainly when we played, that was yesterday. Certainly when we played yesterday on Sunday, they were a lot more comfortable as well.
Okay, perfect. We'll talk more about this current season and the weekend we've just had in a moment, but I want to talk about your history with the sport. You told our friends at the Toxic Takes podcast that when you were given the role of head coach of the Mob, I believe Mason Gordon's exact words were, "I'm giving you the keys to my Lamborghini, and if you ever mess it up, I'm taking the keys away." Right?
Yeah, I think his exact words were, "Don't F it up. I'll take the keys away."
Did that create pressure for you straight away that you had to win?
No, because I was so young. I was 23 years old. I didn't know any better. If I was the age that I am now, 45, and somebody, that probably would have put a little more pressure on me. But then back then I didn't feel any pressure at all. I was just doing what I loved. Slam ball for me as a coach is always like, I don't know, it might be a feeling that a lot of people don't have, but I feel like it's exactly what I was meant to do when I'm out there coaching up the team. So it's a pretty special feeling, but I didn't feel any pressure back then. I don't feel that much pressure now, but I think it's because I've been able to establish myself as a head coach over these years.
Why was that emphasis put on you in the first place? Because obviously 2002 was the first full season of the sport. There had been a prior season in 2001 where the Mob had won over the Rumble. But were you involved in that first season in 2001, or were you coming in 2002?
No, I don't even think that was a real season. Like, I think in 2001, it was like they had 2 teams. It was like the Mob and the Rumble, and they were trying to showcase what a product would look like on the court. And it was just those 2 teams, and the Mob won that game. So I don't think that was like the first official real season was in 2002.
It was a 4-game season, 2001. Mob went 3-1 up on the Rumble. You also had cities back then. It was the Chicago Mob and the LA Rumble, and that's gone. But you came in 2002. Why do you think that emphasis was put on for the Mob specifically? Is it just because they had that little bit of history, or why was this the team that Mason Gordon was so precious over?
It's his favorite team. And he'll never say that publicly. Like, you're not going to get him to say that, but it's his favorite team by far.
Is it now at the stage where it's still a case of if you mess this up, he's taking the keys away? Or is it now The mob is Coach Kirsch. Coach Kirsch is the mob.
I don't know. You'll have to ask him that. It's certainly not Coach Kirsch is the mob. Like the mob is the mob. The one thing that we always talk about as coaches is like, I'm a steward for this team, Coach Ballou and I, right? Like we are running the mob as an organization. And at some point, if SlamBall is successful, an owner will come in and buy that organization. So what our job is as head coaches is to run the organization as best we can, as professionally as we can, as stewards until another owner comes in and buys the team.
But even at that stage, you would still rather be involved in the league or not. You've just said it's the thing that you think you're best at in the world, and you've got some stats to back it up.
I love it. Like there's no doubt. If there was an opportunity to be the mob head coach, for the next 20, 30 years, I would jump on that.
What if it was a different team? What if you were ousted from the mob, but then the Rumble says, hey, we don't want Coach Carter anymore, we want you?
Well, Coach Carter's a very good coach, so I couldn't see them doing that. But out of all the teams, there's 8 teams now. I think the Rumble would be the very last on the list that I would prefer to coach. But I just because of the historic rivalry between the two teams. But certainly, any coaching job in SlamBall is a precious commodity.
How does the modern league, the new one that we've just started with this weekend, how does it compare to 2002 for you? And what are the biggest changes in the ensuing 21 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there are definitely a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. I think this time around, it's being run a lot more professionally as a professional league, where I think the first time around, it was definitely a league, but they wanted to make sure that the product for TV was good. So there was a lot of talk around like, we've got to make sure the product for TV is good. We've got to make sure this and that. And the players didn't care about that. And like as coaches, we didn't, we were trying to put the best product we could on the floor. But at the end of the day, we're trying to win and the players are competitive and they're trying to win. And I think this time around, it's truly being looked at and run as a professional sports league, because I haven't heard any of that talk about like, oh, we've got to make the product on TV good. It's just coach the best you can, play the best you can. Let's hope that these games are as competitive as they can be. But, we had a lot of success in the opening weekend. And I think our closest game was 19 points. And I didn't hear anybody saying, oh, man, those blowouts really didn't make it as entertaining as it could have been. And I think I would have heard something like that in season 2.
Right. Okay. Speaking of season 2, you also told Toxic Takes that the reason SlamBall went off the air at the end of 2003 was because David Stern, the NBA commissioner at the time, tried to run you out of town.
Well, that was not the primary reason. No, like that was that. I don't know if he tried to run us out of town, but we were on ESPN Sports Center all the time on the top 10. Like Scott Van Pelt loved us, Sports Center loved us. And at the same time, the NBA had a TV contract with ESPN, and they definitely saw us as a threat back then to take fans away from them. I think all that has changed over the years because alternative sports, like we all know, established entities like the NBA are going to be around regardless of like SlamBall. And I think having less with them, those organizations feeling like we're less of a threat, I think that allows us more room to succeed.
So you're less of a threat in terms of taking eyes away. What do you think about in terms of taking talent away? Do you think there's the opportunity that maybe not next season, maybe not, hopefully SlamBall's around for a long, long time, but maybe say 10 years time, is there the potential that players will go, I could go to the NBA or I could go and play SlamBall professionally? Do you think there is scope for that in some way?
Yeah, over the years, definitely. Like not anytime soon, just because we're not at the level of money and revenue that the NBA is at. So it makes it tough because players would have to make a decision on, I'm going to take significantly less money in order to play SlamBall. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not bad money that these players are making at all. And if you extend that contract over a period of, multiple years instead of just like a truncated season, then that's even better money. But I could definitely see that in scope over the next few years, but probably not in the next 1 or 2 years. And just candidly, not all of the NBA players would be a good fit for SlamBall because SlamBall is full contact. And there's a lot of basketball guys that absolutely do not like to get hit. Nothing about how physical or not physical the NBA is these days, but SlamBall is a completely different thing.
I liked your call that the Plumlee brothers would be quite good. I think that was said.
There you go. Exactly.
We talked to you. You were coaching in 2002, 2003. Were you coaching the Mob during the 2007 Powerade Challenge version of SlamBall, or were you not?
No, I wasn't. No. So they in 2007, that was kind of like a special event that they did in Atlanta. And I couldn't make that trip. So I wasn't there coaching them. I'm not sure if they had a coach. We had an assistant coach, Thaddeus Hill, that worked with me on some projects, and he was one of our assistants. And he coached, I'm not sure if he coached that team, but he did coach one of the seasons in China, season 5, I believe it was. Okay. So he's stepped in and coached the team a couple times when I couldn't make some of those events.
All right, but you were the coach in 2012 in China for the Mob, correct?
Yes, yeah, in season 4.
Why did you personally make the decision to go with the league to China? Is it just, as you said, even back then you felt this is what you were supposed to do, or was it the best opportunity at the time? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, 100%. Like we go where SlamBall goes, right? China, Italy, like wherever SlamBall goes, we go. And so there was never a hesitation that we wanted to go out there and be part of that season. The only reason that I didn't go in season 5 is just I worked in the NBA on the side, on the business side, and my scheduling conflicts wouldn't allow me to go. But trust me, I tried to get out there. It was just really hard to not be able to make that season. But season 4, for sure, we were out there.
What do you think it is about SlamBall that yourself and the Mob franchise, and I think the Rumble franchise, and Coach Parnell, as I said, the Bouncers franchise, what do you think about these players all coming back to the sport whenever they're called upon? Why is that, do you think? Why is there such a brotherhood there?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It is a brotherhood, and that's why. It's because there are very few people in this world that have been around SlamBall, been on the court, jumped on the trampolines, and it creates a very special bond. And you hear it. You know, LaMonica Garrett was here calling the games for us over the weekend, and they're so excited. They're like kids in a candy store to be back on the court, to be around the new players. They want to share what they learned at their time playing with the new players. So it's kind of like a passing of the torch. It's very serendipitous, and it's very nice for everyone to be back, only because we had these special bonds that went away for like 14 years. And some of these guys fell out of touch. I fell out of touch with some of these guys, and then to be able to come back, it's like nobody ever lost a beat. Everybody is still a very strong, there's a very strong family vibe across SlamBall, and it's pretty cool to see.
Pre-season, you were making sure that there was Zoom calls between your team and players like LaMonica Garrett and former Mob guys. Was that a concerted effort on your part to keep the history of the team alive, or was it more just these are experienced players, they're going to give you some advice?
No, to keep the team history alive, 100%. We had such a special family feel with all those teams, and I wanted for the new players to see that, to see what the players felt back then. And what's really special about the Mob is, like, and I told our players this, our current players, like, if you go back and you watch those old games, the first time you watch them, you may see, oh, Chris Robbins just made a big hit, or LaMonica Garrett put his body on the line to attack a stopper when maybe something wasn't there, those types of things. But what they didn't realize was those players were doing that for everybody else in the team. You know, Sean Jackson taking out George Bird wasn't for Sean Jackson. That was a poor business decision, right? He's 175 pounds and George Bird is 280. But the reason he delivered that hit is for Chris Robbins, for Trevor Anderson, for Kevin Cassidy and those guys. And that was the family feel that I wanted them to understand that the Mob was all about. And I think they have a very similar feel, at least to me early, as those old teams did.
I think I'm trying to make it as easy for new viewers to understand how these teams are. And the comparison I've given for your Mob team after weekend 1 is the 04 Pistons. It doesn't feel like you have anyone who is a definitive de facto, this is our star. You have a lot of guys who are working for the benefit of the team, who are very well coached in what they're expected to do, have defensive strengths, but aren't weak offensively and can run up scores on other teams because they're good on both ends. Is that a fair comparison? And then you've just said it yourself. Do you think these guys have bought into that idea of it's not for me, it's for us?
To answer your first question, yes, I think it's a very fair comparison. Like, we certainly have eyes are going to be drawn to the high flyers on our team, right? And the high flyers are Dak Clark and Cam Hollis and Cam Horton and Brandon Simpson. Like, the eyes are going to be drawn to that. But unquestionably, I consider all those guys interchangeable. And I think they see that too, because there are certain things like, Justin Holloway, Brandon Simpson, they're much better defenders than maybe like Dak or, maybe Cam Hollis are. So I think together, when you mesh the unit together, it's a really strong team. But I view a lot of those guys as being interchangeable and just they buy into our team concept. And for your second question, yes, it very much feels like a family. I believe that's what they feel too. And that's the vibe we get. And I think they bought into that for sure.
Was it hard at all to get them to buy into this process, or does everyone come into it very humble and like, no, I'm here to work and I'm happy with how things are going?
No, it wasn't hard at all. And I think part of that had to do with the draft and our evaluation of these players, because we evaluated them really, really. I mean, we did an in-depth evaluation. It wasn't just on the court. Like Coach Ballou was sick for a week during the second week of training camp. And he was having a quarantine in a hotel. And while he was doing that, instead of not seeing the players in the court, he was doing research on social media on all the players and background checks and all those types of things. So we did such an in-depth evaluation that we came out with a list that we said, these are kids that are not only super talented on the court, but they're high character kids. They have toughness, they have heart, they have fearlessness. And we really thought that group would buy into the system and what we wanted to do, and they have.
So your system first, players to fit the system second.
Yes.
Do you think that's the same across the league, or do you think other coaches have gone, this guy's really good, we need him on our team, we'll work out the logistics later?
I'm not sure. I think there are a few teams that definitely are players first, and then they're going to install the system based on what they have. And I think there are other coaches like Coach Carlson, maybe, who had a system in mind and he specifically wanted to draft for that system. I think it varies a little bit depending on the coach.
Okay. I want to go back to the 2016 season in China, but also 2012 one. And also back to that interview you did with Toxic Takes, where they asked you about your experience in the league and you very candidly said, well, I've won 2 championships. But you also were very quick to almost discredit them as not truncated seasons, but seasons where there was only 4 teams involved. And you sort of said that those aren't as important. Is that because for you, they genuinely aren't? Or is it because you're so focused on the here and now, you don't want to think about, I've done this in the past?
No, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the China Championships. Like when we won in 2012, we were very excited. We had some really tough games. Like the Maulers team back then had Stan Fletcher, Rodney Bond, Sean Jackson, like they were stacked. And that game was a great game and it was a battle back and forth. So I don't want to take anything away from it. Like certainly technically they are championships, right? And Noah Ballou's got his rings, right, to show it. So they are championships. But when I look at it, it was 8 teams in the prior seasons. It was much harder to win those type of championships than it was in the format that we had out in China. So it's almost like I look at it as 2 different things. There was the original seasons championships and then the international series championships. And some people might value them both the same. I value the old championships that the Rumble and the Slashers won and the Riders as a little more valuable than maybe the international series.
And again, those are the seasons that are most comparable to what we're doing today. And so that might be why. But you still won 2 titles. You've still got a pedigree. The Mob are still the winningest franchise in league history with, again, if you take the Powerade series and the 2001 season into account, you've got 4 of the existing, however you want to count it, 6 different league championships, 7 different league championships. Did that, or do you feel like that puts a target on the team's back going into this season?
I don't think it put a target on our back heading into this season, but I certainly think after opening weekend, we have a target on our back. I mean, I know teams are going to they're going to play at a very high level all the time, but they're definitely going to give it a little something extra when they're playing us coming into this next weekend.
Is that what happened with the Slashers last night? I've mentioned to you before we started that we were going to talk about maybe some players who you weren't as jazzed about. You got into it with Bradley Laubacher on the side of the court. Who started that? Was that you or was that him?
I think it was mutual. Like the one thing that I get really upset about, I mean, there's refs and calls and all that stuff, and I think the refs have done a great job so far, but there's all that. But I think the one thing I get really upset about is when players' health and safety is at risk.
Right.
And when you look at drifting, especially on a face-off, like that is one of the most dangerous plays you can possibly make because the island is very hard. And so when players are up there trying to attack the rim at 12, 15 feet and they land on the island, that's when some real bad injuries can occur. So there's kind of an unwritten rule in SlamBall that where if you go up on a face-off and you don't have it, like if you're unprepared for the face-off or the guy clearly has the timing, you're not trying to come in late. You're not trying to drift. You just kind of bail out, give up the points and try to get it back on the other side of the floor. And I don't know if it was intentional or if it was not intentional. We didn't really get into it, but I just made a comment about how we needed to clean up the drifting because that was an easy way for players to get hurt. And I think Bradley took exception to that comment. And I think we had some words for each other, but I can tell you that after the game we connected and everything was good after that. It's just something that happens in the heat of battle.
So you two did the teams connect because obviously later in that same game we had a little bit of a scuffle caused by Cam Hollins and Tony Crosby II. Was everything good there? Was that just because of Cam's a foul, admittedly, but his hit on Amir Smith? Was that what started?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it had been getting testy there for I think the last like two quarters, quarter three and quarter four. Quarter one and two were highly competitive and everybody, it was a good solid game. And then it started to get a little testy in quarter three. And before that, there was a hit where Amir Smith had taken off from like the logo and he was never going to get into the slam zone. And Cam Horton laid a hit and they called that a face-off. And I thought it was a terrible call because you have to be able to get into the slam zone for that to be considered a face-off. And I think he just jumped to jump. So I didn't think that was a very good call. But then that hit that you're talking about, that Cam Hollis laid on Amir Smith, was definitely a totally illegal hit. I mean, he was clearly entering the slam zone. And Cam Hollis is a great kid. He did not mean to like, his intent was not to injure or hurt anyone. We've had this problem with Cam all season where he plays defense too close to the slam zone and he has a football mentality in his mindset. So he has a real rough time, like just laying up and letting the guy go. And so it was one of those unfortunate situations where the game had escalated to a point already where tensions were high and you deliver a hit like that, it's a spark, right? That starts a fire. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why you saw kind of the benches clear. And Tony came to his, Amir Smith's defense, as he probably should have as a good teammate. So I'm just glad that we were able to break it up very quickly because SlamBall has made no quips or qualms about the fact that they will suspend players and coaches who get into altercations for games, even multiple sessions, even an entire weekend. So if you get some of those players suspended for an entire weekend, I mean, your team, that could really impact the success that you're going to have throughout the course of the season.
Are you looking at the Slashers in particular now as a potential rival for the year? Because I think from a fan's perspective, Mob Slashers and Wrath Ozone are immediately the two biggest rivalries in the sport for 2023.
For sure. Wrath Ozone, I think, is the biggest rivalry right now, no doubt. But Mob Slashers, sure, I think so. Like, it's the players all know each other, right? And so there are some things happening off the court that make it highly competitive as well. But the players all know each other. And, we played the Slashers twice in the opening weekend. So obviously there was going to be some heated moments, during those contests. I think the Slashers, in that first game where we beat them, it was like 40 points. They were coming off. It was opening night, and they were coming off. They had just played, and they were gassed. So when we played them first up on Sunday, I knew it was going to be a much more competitive game because they were going to be fresh, we were going to be fresh, and we were going to see really what the teams were going to be able to do. And I think you saw that.
On the fresh versus not so fresh, depending on when you play games, they had that night one, but you guys obviously had that on Sunday night where you played second and had to come against the Buzzsaw in the third game. What's the strategy for trying to mitigate exhaustion with that? Obviously, you were up a reasonably large amount already in your game against the Slashers. You were even trying to continue to increase the points when I think some people were saying maybe let up a bit. You took out Gage Smith with about 3 minutes left to get him some extra rest. Is that just the only strategy to mitigating this short window between games 2 and 3?
Yeah, there's a couple things you can do. If it's a tight game, there's obviously nothing you can do. They have to play through it. But if you're up like we were, I think with about 3 minutes left, 2.5 minutes left, we pulled Gage, and then we have an offense. Basically, we tweak the offense where we run it, but we're really just looking for tramp jumpers and outside shots. That's what we're looking for. Now we tell the guys if there's a lob that's clearly there because the stopper doesn't have the timing, go ahead and throw it. But for the most part, we're going to try to run a little shot clock and then put up either a tramp jumper or an outside shot. It's just at the end of the Slashers game, we didn't get a lot of that. And when you look at the rosters, it's only seven men. So it's tough because you want to rest people, but it's like everybody has to play. And so I think the strategy, if you're playing that second game and you make the main event, the first strategy is don't warm up because there's like 7 minutes to warm up in between those two games. And like our guys, I was like, no warming up, just get water and try to rest the best you can. Like I was so worried about Gage Smith because he was so gassed. I thought we were going to have to start Deontay Bird at stopper and give Gage a quarter off in the Buzzsaws game in that main event. But he was able to get his wind and get his water. And after a 7-minute break, he was good to go.
Okay, you talked about your different coaching strategies there. My biggest thing coming out weekend one is that you guys seem to be the best coached team. Some people might not like hearing that, but the reality from my perspective as a fan is that the strategy you guys are employing is getting a guy onto the island and then having 1, 2, even sometimes 3 cutters off of that position when most other teams are maybe doing only 1 cut, which is a lot easier for a stopper to stop versus your guys' skill of 3. First of all, how hard was that to get the team to understand? Because obviously you've had all this experience, but they're brand new. And second of all, how can you maintain that over the course of a game? Because it sounds so exhausting to have to tell all the guys you're cutting every possession.
It is. And I think the advantage that we had is that we installed that offense in season 2, right? A version of it in season 2. And we didn't run it that well in season 2. And we made some tweaks and we finessed it. And then we reinstalled it in season 3. And the guys ran it a lot better in season 3. And that's what we've been running, a version of that ever since then. That's what we ran in season 4 in China. That's what they ran in season 5 when I wasn't there in China. That's why I still consider that my championship. But we've been running that system or an iteration of that system for a very long time. It's not something you can just decide you wanted to do and install overnight because there's a lot of nuances to it. And we knew with Coach Ballou coming, like that's such a valuable part of our staff and our team because he ran that system. He was our coach on the floor for those last several years and several seasons. So having him as part of the coaching staff is so super valuable. And it allowed us to expedite like the installation of that offense with the players. And don't get me wrong, like the current players are still learning the nuances within the offense. But it is exhausting because it does require a lot of cuts and it's very timing based too.
on the strategy itself, first of all, have I called that right? I just want to make sure that I'm improving myself as being able to understand this sport. Did I phrase it in a correct way how that strategy works?
No, it is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no secret. Like the other teams scout us. We're basically it all starts, we like to get to the ball to the sideline, right? And the reason that we like that is because I like the one tramp lob coming off the top rather than the side because the top tramp is a little closer to the rim. But it all starts with the handler, the gunner. They're kind of interchangeable in our offense, but whoever is attacking with the ball, he really has to be able to attack. So he's reading the stopper all the way into that side bed, and that's what starts it. And as he's in the air, hovering over the side tramp, he doesn't know yet whether he's going to attack or bail and cut to the island. He's watching the stopper and he's going to make that read. If the stopper gets in to time his bounce, he's cutting to the island. And if not, he's going directly to the rim. Now we've had good stopper play so far. So a lot of stoppers can stop that initial attack. And that's where the secondary cutters come in. And we're cutting guys different ways and they can make their own reads. The first guy we like coming off the top bed, but the second guy, he has a lot of options. He can go one tramp lob from the side. He can go stack one. He can go stack stretch cut. So there's a lot of different things that the secondary cutter can do. And then the offense actually recycles after that. We've got a mechanism there where we can recycle that offense. So it's basically like a motion offense and run some different varying schemes out of that.
I definitely need a copy of the Coach Kirsch playbook just so I can fully understand this a little bit better.
Well, the funny part on that is they had us send our playbooks in to SlamBall prior to the season, And I don't know how many pages my playbook was. It was in the 40s or 50s. But the most hilarious thing is, from that playbook that we sent in before the season, we changed every single thing from then until when we actually started the season. Some were minor tweaks, some were major overhauls, but it changed over a period of like 2 months during training camp and team camp.
Why were you asked to send that into the league? Was that to see how, like, your coaching prowess, or what was it for?
Yeah, coaching prowess. They wanted to know the type of systems that each team was planning on running and those types of things. So I wasn't the only one that had to do it. All of the head coaching candidates had to do it. At the time, there were no head coaches knew what their job and role and responsibility was going to be. We all came back to the season not knowing if we were going to be head coaches. And so we kind of had to go through the process of submitting a playbook and doing all those things. And then they selected the 8 head coaches they thought were best fit for the teams for this season.
Okay, and that should be something I can. Well, sorry, why did those plays change over those 2 months? Was that just when you got the teams, the players you knew you were going to have, and it was like, well, we can tweak this a little bit because it's better for Brandon Simpson or whoever it might be?
Yeah, some, and rule changes. Like, there were significant rule changes. The 4-point line changed. They introduced what's called the bounce down rule, where you have the opportunity now to bounce down into the scoring bed if you want to, and can cut to the island. So I think based on the rule changes, and then certainly some of the tweaks that we wanted to make for the players, like, that's why things changed.
All right. Well, then I'll definitely be the updated one so I can stay engaged with everything. Something that Cam Horton mentioned to me in my interview with him was, he talked about the positions of handler, gunner 2 and gunner 3, I think was how he phrased it, or gunner 1, gunner 2. And that's the first time I've heard anyone mention that. And he said that was something you were running into him. Can you explain the difference or the significance of, again, I can't remember if it was gunner 1, gunner 2, or gunner 2, gunner 3, what the difference is between those two positions?
Yeah, we call it gunner 2 and gunner 3 because it's even though we consider a lot of those guys interchangeable, gunner 2 and gunner 3 are doing 2 different things, like not only in the normal base offense, but in all of our set plays. And so we need, like, Cam Horton is a perfect example. He's a handler and he's a gunner. Like, when Justin Holloway's out on the court, he's only a handler. But Cam Horton, Brandon Simpson, those are guys who have to play both handler and gunner, so they have to know all those different spots. So when we're referring to like a gunner 2, we're referring to whoever is in that position, that gunner 2 position in the base offense or our set plays, and that gunner 2 is doing something different than gunner 3 is doing. So you may hear me say something like, Dak, you're in the gunner 3 spot in this play, and Cam Hollis, you're in the gunner 2 spot. Or if Dak's out of the game, I'll tell Cam, like, hey, Cam, you're in that gunner 3 spot in this play, and Cam Horton, you're in gunner 2. So that's kind of, I think, the reference that he's making.
Is that a common parlance in SlamBall coaching, or is this very unique to your style of coaching and offense because of the experiences you've had?
I think it's pretty common across all the coaches. Yeah, I think they're referring to like gunners by their numbers and things like that. If they have them doing something different, some coaches don't care. Like, I know there are some offenses out there where the gunners are completely interchangeable, like on the wings, and they don't really care what they're referenced. But I think if they're needing the 2 separate gunners to do 2 separate things, they're referring to them like that.
Okay. With this opening weekend, we talked about, well, we referenced that you're 4-0, the only team that hasn't lost yet, but what we haven't quite hit the nail on the head on is the dominance with which you're winning. The point differential for the Mob is 116 points in favor of yourselves. The next best is a tie between the Buzzsaw and the Wrath at 30, right? So you've got 86 points up on your competition. Were you expecting this level of dominance from the out, or has that amount surprised you?
No, it surprised me. I knew we would be highly competitive, and I knew we were going to be tough to beat just based on the personnel and the system and the buy-in of the team atmosphere. But I think I was shocked at the level of play that we've had so far, and certainly the discrepancies in scores. I don't think that will continue. I think that other teams are going to improve for sure, and I think you're going to see much tighter games than we've seen so far. But certainly right now, like, our guys were ready to go, and I think that's why you see the discrepancy in the points for and points against.
Is that the biggest thing you're attributing to those wins? Is their preparedness under the lights, or is it their preparedness in terms of coaching into the offense?
A little bit of both. I mean, we still haven't, it's scary, I know, but we still haven't executed our stuff at a high level. Like, in the guys, we're the first ones to tell you that. Like, we have run our offense, but we have not executed at an extremely high level. So I think we could be much better than we are right now. And we're going to install some new little wrinkles into the offense that are going to help us this week heading into the games this weekend. So I think they can even be better than they are right now. But like I said before, I think the other teams are going to get better too. So it's on us to try to improve with every single game.
Okay. Just because I keep noticing your mob polo shirt there. And this sounds like an insane thing to say, but what was pointed out in commentary last night was not just the business-like attitude that it seems like the mob is coming to the games with, but that you guys are the only coaching staff that are showing up in full suits. Is that just what you're comfortable in, or is that a mindset difference for you guys?
Well, I'm not comfortable in that. No, I mean, I love, like, I'm the least fashionable guy anybody's ever met. I live in Orlando, Florida, and on the weekends, I'm in swim trunks and flip-flops like every single weekend. But it goes back to the coaches being stewards of the organization, right? That's so important. And Mason Gordon even talked about this prior to the season starting. Like, we are all right now running our own mini organizations. And I want to take the best care of the mob that I possibly can as its steward until an owner comes in with a lot more money than I have to buy the mob and make it a professional organization. So part of that is, how do we want to represent ourselves? And we feel like representing ourselves as professionals on the sideline, that's important to us. It's not important to everybody. And trust me, like, you look at the NBA, like, you know, Steve Kerr is one of the best coaches out there and he's wearing polo. So it's not necessarily about that or taking anything away from that. It's just about what we feel is the best thing for the mob as an organization right now.
And are you going to take Nate Robinson's advice and wear a wide-brimmed hat if you make it to the championship?
No, I could definitely not pull that off. Now, who could pull that off is probably Noah Ballou. I don't think you would, though. We were scouting games on Saturday, and he showed up with he's from Texas originally, Garland, and he showed up with a cowboy hat and boots and jeans. And if anybody could pull something like that off, it would be him. But it's not me.
I got genuinely worried there and thought you were going to say we were scouting hats on Saturday.
No, that's not on the schedule.
That's fine. That's fine. We mentioned Cam Horton. He was your first pick of the draft, the fourth pick overall. Do you think that puts expectation and pressure on him? He says that it doesn't. He says that all that matters is that you play well. And is that, I suppose that's one of the qualities you were looking for from him. But do you think being that high up in the draft is a pressurizing situation for a young player?
For some players, yes. For him, no. I mean, because we talked about it from the very beginning, and I told all the guys, I think it was the day that we had the draft, I told them all, like, don't worry about where you were selected in the draft. It's one single unit. And we don't know, like, we know that this unit would mesh well, but we don't know which players are truly going to pop or not. Like, Kevin Cassidy was one of the greatest stoppers to ever play, and we drafted him in round 6. You know, Noah Ballou was one of the best handlers to ever play, and we drafted him in round 4. So some of the best players to ever play the game weren't necessarily drafted in the first round, and we knew that was going to be the case. But Cam Horton is such a good kid, and we drafted him based on his character and leadership as much for his talent on the court. So we were never really worried about him feeling like there was pressure being drafted in that spot.
Is there an expectation from you for him to be as good as Noah Ballou was, perhaps?
Not at all. No, we just want Cam Horton to be Cam Horton. It's like, you know, Noah, what he had was really special, and he was able to capitalize on his talent because he was talented, but he was also an extremely hard worker. Like, he improved dramatically over season 2, and season 3, and then he continued that improvement in China. But all these players are going to have their own evolution, right? And we don't want them to be anybody else. We just want them to be them.
I mean, Cam said that he wants to play in this league for the rest of his life, if he can do, for 10 plus years. First of all, do you think that's realistic for him? And then do you think that there's the potential that this league could still be around for the length of his career?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think any of us would be out here doing this if we didn't think the league had a very bright future. I mean, I think the things that held us back the first time around were one was social media, right? It was just, it wasn't a thing. And this game is very highlight centric. And 2, I think that this next generation of 18 to 32-year-olds are looking to grab on with both hands to something that is not an established sport. They'll still watch all the established sports. Like, I watch NBA and NFL all the time, but I think that generation is a little bit bored of having to sit through 4.5 hour Major League Baseball games for 162 events a year, right? And so they're looking for something that's more hard hitting, action packed, shorter games, and all those things. And I think that's what we bring to the table. So I have very little doubt that SlamBall is going to be around for a very long time after this. And Cam Horton could certainly have a long and successful career if that happens.
The other player we've talked about a lot, and I do want to hit on, because I think after this weekend, the unanimous MVP of the league is Gage Smith. You talked about getting players later in draft than you were expecting. Did you expect him to go as low as he did in draft order?
No, Coach Ballou and I met the night before the draft to go over like our final strategy, and again the next morning. And we actually said, okay, we're taking Cam Horton in the first round. We know that that's who we're targeting, and we would build kind of an offense around him. And then we were talking about, man, wouldn't it be great to be able to get Darius Clark in round 2? And we were both like, there's no way that's going to happen. So we were probably going to take Gage Smith in round 2 if Darius Clark wasn't around. Darius Clark was around, and we were shocked. We were like, how did this happen? So we took Darius, and then as we started, it was a snake draft. So as it started coming back around to us, like we had such a close eye on Gage Smith, and we were like, please be around, because he was a gunner all of camp and all of tryouts, and he was a very high level gunner. But what I saw in Gage was fearlessness and timing, and those are the two key attributes to being a great stopper. And so we knew we were going to draft him most likely to play stopper, and that's what we were looking as he was coming back around and he was available. We knew at that moment when we got him, and our first 3 picks were Cam Horton, Dak Clark, and Gage Smith, that we had an opportunity to be really good. And then we just got super fortunate that the players that we liked that were high on our draft board were still around later on in the draft.
Was Gage Smith receptive to the idea of, we want you to play stopper instead of gunner, or was there a little bit of trepidation?
No, he was totally receptive to it. I think I called him on the night of the draft after we drafted him, and I told him, I'm going to need you to play stopper. And I think he spent that night watching film on Kevin Cassidy. And the next day he came in and was like, I'm ready to go, coach. I watched all Kevin's film, and I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm ready to go.
The thing that jumps out to me for him, well, first of all, you've talked about his timing and fearlessness. Are those things... were those things that were coached into him from everyone during training camp, or are those just innate skills he seems to have from his time playing college basketball?
Yeah, the timing is coached into them. He had a lot of that, but it's coached into him, the stopper timing and kind of the finesse. Fearlessness you can't teach, right? That's just something that the guys either have or they don't. And if they don't have it, they're not going to get it. And if they do, then they have it for, the rest of their lives. And he's got total and utter fearlessness. And all of the best stoppers that ever played had that. Adam Hooker, George Bird, Kevin Cassidy, Rodney Bond, like all those guys were totally and utterly fearless. And that was what made them great stoppers. The timing stuff can be taught for sure.
I'm glad you used the word finesse, because since the season's began, he's unlocked this new thing to me when looking at stoppers, that you have finesse stoppers and you have physicality stoppers. And he strikes me as the former, and the only guy in the league right now that I would say is definitively that. His timing is one thing, but his awareness outside the tramps is another. He's the only player I'm seeing who's got 1 foot on the edge of the tramp and is constantly watching where the ball's coming from so that he can time getting into that bottom tramp and disrupting an offense without even having to jump. Was that something that you've coached to him, or has he come to the table and said, this is how I see the game, this is what I want to do?
That is something, that's how our stoppers have always played, right? And a lot of stoppers have, with 1 foot on the pad, ready to enter. And a great stopper is constantly going to have his eyes on what's happening on the open floor, right? It's kind of like in hockey, a goalie, like you don't see the goalie when the puck is behind the net. You don't see the goalie coming back there to see what's happening. Like the goalie is still keeping an eye on everything that's happening in front of him. And so some of that was taught, but don't get me wrong. Like Gage has some very, very innate ability that can't be taught. Right. And some of the things that he does surprise Coach Ballou and I on the sidelines. Like there was a moment, I think, in the Buzzsaws game on Sunday where he did turn his back a little bit and it opened up like a one tramp lob that I knew was coming, like completely clear one tramp lob. And they threw it and he was able to get like a finger on it to deflect it. And he does some of those amazing things that we're just not used to seeing in the stopper position. So I'm a very firm believer when I say this. I think Gage Smith can be the greatest stopper that's ever played this game. I don't think he's quite there yet, but if he improves every single game, I think he'll get there.
You say that. He currently leads the league in steals, loose ball retrievals, and stops, and it's not exactly close in some of those categories. While also the eye test is clearly showing that he's good at that. And you're having him run your offense from just inside your own half, and he's distributing the ball when you get around the tramp. So if people can't see that that's potential now, then I don't know. But he's certainly
100%.
For most people, he's top of the tree right now.
No doubt. There's zero doubt in this league he probably is. I compare him historically to like Kevin Cassidy and all those guys that I mentioned, like George Bird, all those guys. I'm putting him in that because those stoppers were really, really good back in the day. So that's kind of what I'm comparing him to.
Okay, I want to finish up with first of all, do you think he can keep that going for the remainder of the season? You said you think he's going to improve game to game, but just with, I think you said about 2.5 minutes left in that game against the Griffs. So that would say that out of the 80 minutes you played this weekend, he's played in like 77.5 of those minutes. Do you think that he can keep up this pace for the remainder of the season, or at some point is just the physicality going to catch up to everyone involved?
Mm-hmm. It will, and that's on us as coaches. We have to at some point here soon. There's going to have to be more load management discussions on, like, we've got a really good backup stopper in Deontay Bird. It's George Bird's son, and he certainly can go in there and play stopper at a high level. And candidly, Cam Hollis is an excellent stopper too. So that's why when we bring Gage up into the offense, if somebody has to cover back, it's usually Cam Hollis, and he has no problem making stops down there as well. So we'll probably give Gage more of a break as the season goes on, because you just don't want, even if he could hold up, you don't want a stopper taking that much of a beating over the course of those games. And that goes back to the schedule too, is I don't think that maybe we were hopeful that we would play in both main events, but there are some teams that still have only played 2 games, right? So that their load management is going to be a little bit different than our load management. If we continue to have to play in every single main event because we're winning the first games, then our strategy as coaches is going to change a little bit on personnel.
Do you like that scheduling from the league? Because from my perspective, that's another element of what's being preached, that SlamBall wants parity. And I think the idea that the teams who are winning more, well, they're obviously playing double of the amount as well, and that's going to catch up to them eventually. Or are you thinking as a coach, well, this isn't fair on my players. They're more likely to get tired. They're more likely to get hurt. We're more likely to get exposed in terms of our strategies.
So I understand why the league is doing it, because they want, it's a nice concept. It's like UFC, right? You've got one game, another game, and then the winners play, but it's not feasible the way that it's set up today. Like to have 7 minutes of warm-up time between games is it's not sustainable. Like, we'll be able to do it this season, but certainly as we go in other seasons, they've got to change that format, because there's going to be an injury that's going to happen, like unquestionably. And that's going to be due to the fact that there's not enough warm-up time and we're playing too many games in too truncated a format.
Okay. My last 2 questions for you. I've asked every coach this that I've interviewed so far. And so I'm very interested to what your answer is, given commentary last night said they can't see a single flaw in the Mob game. What are your biggest strengths and weaknesses as we go into the remainder of the season?
Yeah, it's funny because I see tons of flaws.
Perfectionists do, I guess. And if you're a coach, you have to be.
I like to watch the game sometimes. Like I'll break down the film of what we're doing, and then I'll watch the game one time through as a fan, just to see what was the fan experience of SlamBall. And I understand why people say that, because I think to the general fan, it looks relatively flawless, but as coaches, it doesn't. Like, we see the gaps, we see the mistakes, we see the areas of improvement. But I would say our strengths, number one is probably team camaraderie, right? The guys truly feel like a family, and they truly are a team. And so I think that goes a long way, because if you're going into battle with the guy next to you, knowing that you're going into battle with him because he's your family, that's a heck of a lot different than just a bunch of individuals trying to play SlamBall. So I think that's a strength. I think their passing, their ability to finish, I think stopper play, like there's certainly a lot of strengths. Defense, because they are an undersized team, but they are not afraid to hit. They're not afraid to lay the wood. And that has kind of been the mob mentality for a long time. So I think all those things are strengths. I think weakness, the number one weakness, and I think the guys would tell you this too, is probably the ability to execute our system and our plays when they're tired. Because we'll call out some stuff that we want to run, and you can just see that they're gassed physically. And sometimes that can affect the mind. And so they're a little bit out of position, or somebody forgets timing on something. And SlamBall is so timing predicated that if you become out of position or the timing is off, it kind of ruins the entire play or what we're trying to do. So we've got to clean some of that up for sure. And we'll work on that this week.
And then I want you to finish this interview by answering the internet's question, which they would phrase as, who can stop the mob? I will phrase it a little bit kinder and say, who do you personally see as your biggest competition thus far into the league?
It's ourselves. Like, I truly, and I told the team, I don't think if we play our A game, I don't think anybody can beat us. But it's just a matter of where we can get beat is if we beat ourselves with dumb violations, because it's only one face off a quarter. And then you go to face-off violation points and those types of things. And I think you saw with like the Ozone the other night, they had like 9 violation points in one possession. So it can be really easy to lose a game if you make some bad decisions. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I think that we'll be able to do that. So maybe a team will shock us and come out and punch us in the mouth. But right now, I don't see what team that is.
Well, thank you, Coach Kirsch, for speaking to me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening at home. Coach, where can they find you? Where can they hear more about your great SlamBall insights?
Absolutely. I had no social media presence whatsoever until SlamBall came back, and now I'm SlamBall Coach BK on Instagram, and everybody can follow me and check that out.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. Can't wait for SlamBall to start off again on Thursday night.